Everyone, I'm Jared with Meeple Mentor, and I'm with Jay again.
Hey.
And this is episode 3 of our official podcast named Mentor Minutes, so thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about our Game of the Month. We each picked 2 choices of games that we had played this month that we just want to talk about and share our thoughts on. Sort of a light review, if you will.
Yeah.
So we each have, I believe, different picks.
We do.
So this episode may be a little shorter than normal, but we wanted to just jump in and talk about some of our favorites that we've played this month. And we do have an announcement as well that you can check out later in the episode. So first we're going to dive right in and talk about our first pick for Game of the Month that we've played.
Sounds good.
Okay. Jay, why don't you go first?
Sure. So this is an oldie but a goodie. It's actually one of the first games that I played when I started, collecting and getting into the hobby a few years back. And the game is Lords of Waterdeep. This is really a gateway level sort of family game, but it introduces worker placement a lot of times for the first time. So it's a great intro game for friends. And although Lords of Waterdeep takes place in sort of the Dungeons and Dragons universe, it's not, RPG or anything like that. So you don't really have to have any, knowledge or experience with Dungeons and Dragons to play it and enjoy it. Basically what it is you have the board set up, which is really just a picture of Waterdeep, which is a town in the D&D universe. And each of the different buildings represent different areas you can go to. So, for example, you'll be drafting these cards that are called quests, and each quest requires a certain amount of resources, or in this case, characters to fulfill the quest. So, for example, you may have a quest that requires, a rogue and a mage to complete the quest, and those are represented by different cubes, different colored cubes that you pick up along the board at these different buildings. Mm-hmm. So you might go to a tavern to pick up a couple rogues. You might go to, like a church or a sanctuary to pick up like a priest, these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And those aren't the actual characters, but there's 4 different types in the game. And what's neat about the game is it's very simple, and it starts out very easy. It's 8 rounds, but it plays really quickly. And the way the game works is, at first, you're just putting your pieces on the board that have these designated spots for buildings. But then, as the game progresses, you can actually buy new buildings from a stack that's available for purchase in Waterdeep Harbor, mm-hmm. and or in the Builders Hall near Waterdeep Harbor. And when you build those buildings, you then place those out on the board, and they become another spot where either you can send your own workers, or other people can send their workers to get resources from that spot. And the cool part about that is that the board slowly builds up more and more throughout the game, and it gives you a lot more options of spaces where you can go. And if you own the buildings, then whenever any of the other players go there, you also get a benefit because of the fact that they used your building. So it's a neat game. It's got pretty cool artwork, very similar to what you'd see in D&D. And some pretty fun kind of flavor text on the different cards.
Right.
There are some a little bit of take that elements. They're called mandatory quests.
I hate those.
Yeah, everybody hates those. And you can play those on other people, and essentially they have to complete that quest before they can complete any of their other ones.
It's a great way to slow someone down.
It is, especially near the end of the game, which is one reason why a lot of people will just take those cards out and they play it sort of the friendly version. Mm-hmm. But we really enjoy this. It works great even with younger kids. And if you like expansions, there's one called Scoundrels of Skullport. And that expansion really elevates the game to a little bit more of a medium level game with a lot more strategy. You can take corruption, but get better actions as a result. But then the more corruption you have, the more points you'll lose at the end of the game. So it's really, really, really cool game. And that's my first pick for Game of the Month, Lords of Waterdeep.
Excellent. And that's a great choice, too. And, it doesn't get as much love as it deserves as a great entry-level, worker placement game to get people into the concept of that game mechanism. So
yeah, and I think out of the box it plays 5 players. But with expansion, you can actually bump it up to 6, and that can be a lot longer game.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it still plays, even those 8 rounds go pretty quick. So I highly recommend it.
Sweet. So I love when we get to play some older classics and feature them. So, but for my pick, I'm going to go with a newer game. This came out from Stonemaier Games called Pendulum by Travis Jones. Have you got a chance to play it?
I have. I've played it a couple times, and it's definitely an interesting concept. Something I haven't seen before.
So, like Lords of Waterdeep, it's a worker placement game. But unlike Lords of Waterdeep, it adds timers, like sand timers, that are, they control 3 different areas on the board. And each timer has a different amount of time that it takes for all the sand to go out. Now, if you're thinking, okay, well, if you're putting a timer on things, then maybe it's going to get too stressful or, like worrying about, getting stuff done quickly. Well, it's not really who plays the quickest. And it's an interesting way to do it because the timers are basically how you take your actions because you choose where you're going based on where the timer isn't. And then once the timer flips to where your worker is, then you're allowed to take the action. So instead of like Lords of Waterdeep or other worker placement games, as soon as you place your worker, you get the action. This one has that delayed gratification or whatnot. So once the sand runs out, that's when everyone is waiting for someone to flip it. And anyone can do that. There's not any game mechanism that forces it to flip. And so, what you find is that the timers kind of just go on their own because enough people are waiting for the timer to be done so that they can complete an action. Essentially, instead of trying to beat the timer, you're trying to beat other players who might want to move the timer. And that's where I really think they took the right road here on how to implement timers into this kind of game. So in order to win, there's 4 tracks of victory points that you need to move up to. There's a parchment area on your player board, and so all of them have to be in the parchment for you to be able to win. And if someone, if multiple people have all their victory point tokens in the parchment, whoever's got the most advancements in that parchment would then win. But there's also one of those 4, a special one called the Legendary Achievement, and it's only obtainable once. And every round, anybody can gain it based on one of the randomly flipped over achievement cards. Once someone's achieved it that round, they can take the token to give them their one legendary achievement. And then for the rest of the game, they're done with it. They can't earn it again. But when someone takes it, no one else can earn it that round, so you have to wait. And there's only 4 rounds in the game. So in a 5-player game, you might be a little bit more pressed on trying to get those achievements done sooner than the other players. But there is another way to get one in the final round by means of what's called a council reward card. The council reward cards are given every round, no matter your position on anything else. It's just they give you a certain bonus at the end of the round. The council reward cards are first come, first serve. So whoever takes the only one that has that achievement possible, then the other people that may have missed out in the first 4 rounds won't qualify and won't get that point. It's very colorful. They kind of use the color to their the gameplay and visibility, so you can see across the table like where the actions are supposed to go. And within each of those color areas where those timers are, there's the top and bottom rows that are identical, so you don't have to worry about knowing a whole bunch of things. It's just this area has these 3 actions, this area has those 4 actions, and then just depending on where the timer sits, which row is kind of where you have to place your worker. It's a really interesting game. I think if you like worker placement games, if you like the idea of adding timers to sort of play a unique sort of experience when it comes to Euros, because it's still a very heavy Euro, I think you guys should give it a try. It's pretty fun, so that's my game of the month.
Yeah, this was neat because what I liked about it too was, unlike a lot of these timed games where you're super stressed the whole time, and people who sort of think faster usually do better in those types of games, this one actually gave you time to think because you were, like you said, you were waiting on those sand timers, so you had a little bit of downtime to plan. But they also kept the game moving too, which was good. And then between rounds, you have time to kind of regroup and think. So it was a really unique game. I haven't played anything like it before.
Yeah. So that's Pendulum.
Yeah. All right. So for my second pick for games I played this month that I really enjoyed, I chose Raids. Raids is a Viking-themed game, also another family-type weight game. If you've played Takedo, you'll recognize the mechanism. And this is a mechanism I like in a lot of games. And that is you can go as far as you want down a path, but then you may end up skipping things along the way. But you can do that to get to bonuses first. The way this works is you each have Viking ships, and you have a map where you're doing a circular route around the board. And at different places along that circular route, you'll have different objectives or different just different things you can do. And each of those things is random. So you play 4 rounds, and there are these sort of tiles that represent each of the 4 rounds, and you randomly distribute them around the board. And they could be things like monsters that you fight. It could be rune stones that you're collecting. It could be animals that you're picking up and that you're going to sell to the market, or villages where you can pick up more Vikings. And what I like about it is everybody has their sort of own Viking board that shows a Viking ship, one of the longboats.
Right.
And then there's a shield on the side, the number of shields on the side of the longboats, and you can only hold meeples enough meeples that fit on each of the shields, basically. So once you've run out of shields and you have enough Viking meeples on your ship, you can't load anymore. But those Vikings that you have on your ship are also used for battles. So the neat part about the game that I like a lot is on your turn, you similar to with Pendulum, where you don't get the action as soon as you move there. You have to go to the spot, and then you have to wait an entire round or turn until it comes back to you to get what it is that you're where you are.
Right.
And what that does is it gives other players opportunities to plant their ship like right next to yours and then initiate a battle. And so if they do that, it's got a really neat sort of combat mechanic where to initiate the battle, you have to spend 1 Viking. So you have to throw the Viking out of your ship to initiate the battle. Then the person who's defending has to get rid of at least 2 Vikings to defend themselves.
Okay.
And if they successfully do that, then the next player has to do 1 more, so they then have to get rid of 3 Vikings out of their ship. So it becomes really, really cost prohibitive for the person attacking to stay in the battle too long, because they're losing up to 4 Vikings, which you may only have 6 on your board whenever they do that. But it's neat because you can then chase the ship off to another space or whatever. The game also has really great components. It's got great artwork, and it even comes with metal coins right in the box.
Nice. I love when they do that.
Yeah, and it's a small box game. It's probably about $30. It's not that expensive. But that's my pick, second pick a month. That's called Raids.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I can't wait to try that.
It is cool.
My second pick for Game of the Month is a game called Bosk. And I recently got to play this a lot with my daughter, who's 7. So it is family weight as far as the complexity, but it is also very strategic. Not to say that she could probably beat me, but it's certainly, if you're a gamer, you could take this a lot of ways to try to win. It takes place over the course of a year, and every season is sort of like a different round. But every other season is when you're doing actions, and then the between seasons, or the second and fourth, are rounds of scoring. So the actions are really in spring and then fall. So in spring, you take turns placing your cardboard standy trees on the grid lines of the map. And on the map, there's terrain, colors, and stuff like that. But for now, in that round, you're just trying to place trees to gain control of the lines. And so after everyone's placed all their trees, which are numbered 1 to 4, and there's 2 of each, so you have 8 trees, then you count up however much points your trees contributed to controlling the line that they're on, whether they're horizontal or vertical. Every row and column will score, so majority, whoever's got the most points will get, I think, 3 points, and then second most will get 1 point. But if you have full control, you're going to get more points as well. And so you go through that, and that's the round of scoring for summer. Starting in the fall, that's when players will one by one choose numbers 1, 2, 3, and then 4 trees to blow leaves in a certain direction. The direction is initially chosen by whoever has the lowest points when you get there. Once that direction's been chosen, the wind board stays there, and it just alternates in a clockwise manner the direction of the wind. So every round you're blowing leaves in a different direction. And when it comes to your turn, you can choose one of your 8 leaf tiles, which are numbered essentially 1 to 8. And you get to place that many leaves starting from that tree, that number, towards the direction of the wind. And you can do, the space in front or to the diagonals, and then it just has to keep going further. Eventually, some spaces will have other players' leaves that you want to place on top. You can do that, but it costs you extra leaves to do that. You just pay an extra leaf per opponent's leaf on that space to cover it. And basically, whoever's leaf is on top of each space will be controlling that cell or that grid. And we look at the end of the game, which is the 4th round, whoever's leaves are, majority control of each terrain type gives you extra points. So if you've controlled the grassy green area, first place is 5 points, second place is 3 points, and if you're uncontested, you might get 8 points. So, you don't want to let someone run away with the lead. So it's a really interesting, sort of strategy game based around positioning, area control, and player versus player. Which space am I going to try to really control, or am I just going to let that one go to place more leaves on the board?
This was a really pretty game. It's always one I've wanted to try. Mm-hmm. Have you played Photosynthesis before?
I have.
Now, how do you compare the two, or do they compare, I guess?
Well, they're both very similar in theme, but I think Photosynthesis, it has less replayability, in my opinion. After playing I've played Photosynthesis more than Bosk, but maybe that's part of why I say that there's less options with Photosynthesis. I feel like once you kind of know sort of the ideal positions to be in Photosynthesis, you always strive for those. Mm-hmm. But with Bosk, you don't really, it's very dynamic. It feels almost like an abstract game like Go, where you have to tactically decide where the next best position will be based on your opponent's trees. Right. And so because of that, every game's going to feel different. Whereas Photosynthesis, everyone kind of knows where the best places to be are, and so it's just always fighting for those same positions. Whereas with Bosk, it's a matter of, do I want to place these trees to win these grid lines, like for this first season, or do I want to position them where I know that once the leaf phase comes around, I'll be in a better place to drop them on certain terrains. So I feel like it's just got more options to it. But either way, you choose whichever game that you prefer. I'm going to personally keep both, because even though they're the same type of theme, they play very differently. And again, Bosk is more of an area control game and more tactical, and Photosynthesis is more about, strategic planning and making sure that you maximize your turn.
Yeah, I liked with Photosynthesis, I liked how the sun rotates and you have the shadow. Mm-hmm. But it was neat because it sounded like with Bosk, you've got that wind mechanic for scattering leaves, and that seems really interesting. So yeah, I got to try this.
And you never know where the wind is going to start, because the person who has the lowest points gets to place that wind board.
Yeah, and then it goes from there. That's neat. Cool game.
So in our next segment of our episode, we thought it would be fun to take a look at some of our top picks for games over $100. So these are games that, you're investing quite a few chunks of change here. So is it worth it? What makes it worth it? And what would we recommend?
Yeah, definitely. And this is tough because it definitely hits the bottom line. So I think when I was coming up with the games that I chose, I was really trying to look at, value that you get for the money you spend, not just the fact that it's a, really popular game or something like that.
Sure. And popularity, I think, shouldn't have anything to do with it. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to spend money just because everyone else is. And if you're like us, if you're on a tight budget, you got to make some tough decisions on what kind of games you're going to be getting and how many. So for this list, we both kept it very short. We're just going to give 2 recommendations each. So I guess I'll start first. My first recommendation is a game that I consider to be one of my top 10 favorite games. It's called Food Chain Magnate. Have you played this?
I've not. I've been intimidated because it is a heavy game that I've heard is very punishing.
Definitely heavy, definitely very competitive. If you're the kind of gamer that enjoys a game where you're constantly thinking about your long-term strategy, and you like highly competitive games where your decisions can very quickly undercut your opponents, And the idea of building your own business, this is a perfect game for that. In fact, if you think of the idea of Monopoly, not necessarily the way that the board game is, but rather what kind of game would it be if you could develop your own business and take over the competition and completely crush them, using marketing, using price strategy. These are the kinds of things and tools at your disposal as a CEO of your own fast food chain restaurant. That's the premise of Food Chain Magnate. Because of that, it can be really, really good if you like that sort of thing, but if you're not up for that sort of cutthroat business competition, it may not be for you. But it is one of my favorite games. That's just kind of what I like. One thing that's really cool about the game is you start with just yourself as your only employee, the CEO, and through the game you hire all these other employees to make up your organization. And you'll have to hire cooks and marketers and people to, build new businesses. And where you place your restaurant at the beginning is very crucial to understanding like where you're going to be competing and who you're going to be selling against. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of strategy, but it is a little bit of an expensive. It's like just over $100 because it's limited print runs and it's made in Germany. So if you can get your hands on a copy, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun if you like that deep strategy.
Yeah, this always reminded me of like that college economics class, know, and it seems like it's pretty true to life when it comes to.
And I did study business marketing in college, so I guess this is right up my alley.
There you go. So my first pick is a game from Weta Workshop. And if you've heard of Weta Workshop, they're actually the studio behind all the creature designs for Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. So they're based in New Zealand. Well, for some crazy reason, they came out with a board game. And the board game is called Giant Killer Robots Heavy Hitters, or GKR Heavy Hitters. And what it really is it's a skirmish game that takes place on this huge board with huge sort of towers and buildings, and you're getting points for, shooting the other players because you all have a bunch of mechs that you're doing the combat with, and it's all card-driven combat. It's actually a really well done game, but the neat thing and the reason that Weta is involved and why I think it's so cool is all the miniatures for the mechs and sort of the other sort of bots and stuff that are on each of the 4 factions are all hand painted. Designed by Weta Workshop. So the detail is That's amazing. Cool. It runs about $110, I think, but I've actually seen it on sale, even on Amazon once in a while for around $80 or something. But just for the miniatures alone, it's a cool game. It has a great table presence, and this is the kind of game that if somebody walks by and they see, these 6-inch mechs, all over the board. In this combat game, it draws the attention, and the artwork on the cards and everything else is really cool too. And a lot of the mechanisms that they built into the game make it more than just a sort of I'd say a light level skirmish game. I mean, there's actually some really good strategy and depth as well. So that's my first pick, GKR Heavy Hitters by Weta Workshop.
Awesome. That kind of sounds like a more competitive version of Mechs versus Minions.
It is. But instead of programming, you get to choose your hand of cards, what you're going to play. But then when you get injured, you actually have to discard cards out of your hand. So you thin your deck. Yeah. And essentially, when you don't have enough cards, that represents your life. And then you'll lose the game the more cards you lose. So it's got a really neat spin on a typical sort of combat skirmish type game.
That sounds awesome. All right, so my next one, or my last one that I wanted to recommend to you, if you're willing to shell out the money, is Nemesis by Awaken Realms. Nemesis is a fantastic semi-co-op game. It's a Ameritrash, so there's no points or anything like that. But everyone has goals, and a lot of these goals, you don't know if your opponents chose a secret goal that is detrimental, let's say, to you surviving on the ship. Everyone's assigned a player number, and some of the goals might say, hey, in order for you to win, not only do you have to do the regular ship objectives, but you have to make sure player one is dead, or you have to make sure the ship is destroyed at the end of the game, or you have to make sure you're going to Mars instead of Earth. So it adds in not only just a traitor mechanic, but sometimes certain players are targeted, and you just don't know, if you're in trouble or if maybe someone is out to get you. Now, the premise of Nemesis is everyone wakes up from a hibernation sleep on a spaceship out in the universe. The players wake up, and essentially there are aliens aboard the ship. They don't know where they are, but they slowly come out as players move around the ship and make noise. And these aliens, think the movie Alien, but on a board game, but it's not the IP. And it comes with all these miniatures. There's a queen. There's like 4 stages of their species. In this game, they're called intruders. That's the official alien name or species classification. So you're fighting these aliens in order to get certain things done, such as check the status of the engines, making sure they're working, checking the coordinates, making sure you're heading towards the right, planet, hopefully Earth, and accomplishing whatever secret objective that you were given at the beginning. Now, you are dealt 2 at the beginning of the game, and as soon as the first intruder appears on the board, everyone has to simultaneously make a decision on which card they're gonna keep. It's amazingly thematic. It's very fun, very replayable, and it's one of those games you're going to be talking about with your friends weeks, months afterwards. It's just it creates memories, and I think, and that's what any great Ameritrash game should do. It's a little harder to strategize, like you might if you're a Euro gamer, because so much of it is dice rolls and playing off of opponents and things that happen to you, like the event cards that come out every round and affect the ship. You can't let the ship get destroyed. But, all in all, this game is just fantastic. It's just an experience that every gamer should play. And if you have the means, I highly recommend that you pick up Nemesis.
Yeah, it's a great game. My first play of this, what I was really impressed with is just the sort of the atmosphere that the game sets. Because you really quickly get into the spirit of the game, especially not knowing who might be out to get you or whether your objective is going to just mess up everybody else.
There's those meta dynamics of like, oh, well, this person says that the engines are okay, but do I trust them? And is this person doing this because that's their objective, or are they really trying to undermine what I'm doing?
Right. And everything really fits with the theme. All the actions you can do fit with the theme. And the miniatures, I think that's...
they're amazing.
They're amazing miniatures. This is
just very impressive.
This is Awakened Realms, I think?
Awakened Realms, yeah.
Very cool game. So my pick, and this one is actually well over $100. So it's hard for me to sort of recommend this to people to go out and buy. But I'll
steal it.
But I'm gonna.
No. Just kidding.
No. but the reason that I find a lot of value in this, and this is it's the giant edition of Takenoko.
Ooh.
So this is there's actually been 2 Kickstarters. So there was a first Kickstarter several years ago, and then one about a year ago. And what it is it takes Takenoko and it just it enlarges every piece on the board. So where you have, these hexagon tiles that make up sort of this garden area. And the game, basically, if you've not played it, is you've got a gardener and you have a panda. And the panda is trying to eat bamboo and the gardener is trying to grow bamboo. And you're getting points by either arranging the garden tiles in certain patterns or collecting certain bamboo, or making sure that the situation on the board is such where certain heights of the bamboo and colors all match, some of the cards that you have to complete objectives. So what they did is they took this game that had these tiny, miniatures that were about 1 inch high, and they made them like 6 inches high. And all the pieces are wooden pieces for the bamboo stalks. So it barely fits on a table, but I've never seen a game, beside being beautiful, I've never seen a game that just stops people as soon as they walk by and makes them question, like, what is this thing?
Right.
Because it looks more like a work of art, really, when you're
Right.
finishing.
Like a mural that you're creating.
Yeah, like a mural. And so it's one of those games that you're probably not going to play with your family that often because it does take up so much space. But if you bring this to a convention, I mean, it's going to get a lot of attention. And it's definitely something that if you're trying to attract people to, say, like a meetup or, a gaming event, having these giant versions of games, I think is a really good way of doing that. So for me, Takenoko was definitely worth getting that Super Meeple, giant version of.
So I guess if you're running a convention anytime soon, maybe you could get a copy of this and do a tournament, right? And have it always being played and maybe scored against the teams and stuff like that throughout the days.
Yeah, we thought about doing this with our meetup where we'd actually have like giant game night.
Nice.
So you'd have giant King Domino and Takenoko and maybe Fireball Island or some of these other ones, and just rotate around the tables. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Now we've got a special announcement regarding the Meeple Mentor channel. So if you're listening to our podcast, just so you know, this is part of a YouTube channel as well. So head on over to YouTube, Meeple Mentor, where we do tutorials on games of medium to complexity to heavy complexity. I also cover lore for various board games, and I've done some game designer interviews. And now we've got this podcast going, which has a video version if you're looking for that. So I'm very excited and happy to announce that the Meeple Mentor channel is now officially part of the Gateway Network, which originally started from the Gamecasters podcast. But the Gateway Network is a collection of board game content creators, such as YouTubers like myself, podcasters, Instagrammers, artists, a collection of content creators as part of this network. So we're very excited to be part of that, and check the link in the description to go directly to the website and see all the other content creators out there that are currently part of the network. And also check out the Instagram for the Gateway Network, which has all sorts of news and updates for you about all our creators.
Good stuff. It's good stuff.
I'm very excited. This is really cool.
Yeah, very cool.
We want to start featuring and discussing or introducing some of the other content creators. We are talking with the guys over at the Gamecasters to try to get them on the channel, on the Meeple Mentor channel, for one of our upcoming Mentor Minutes podcasts. So look forward to that. We'll be announcing that more, or maybe we'll just pop up one day and they'll be in the episode. So stick around and you'll see for yourself.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. Looking forward to it. Yeah, I think it's a great way to highlight some content creators, some of those that you've probably actually heard of before, and then some new ones that you haven't. So it's great to get help to get a few of those folks some more traction on the channels and podcasts. So we're happy to be part of that.
Yep. So stick around. We'll be talking about a lot of that stuff in the upcoming weeks. So with that, we've reached the end of our shorter episode of Mentor Minutes. So I've been Jared.
I'm Jay.
Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll see you around next time.
Catch you next time.